Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Day One Cricket Podcast. Hopefully, in what will be sort of a recurrent series over the Ashes, I've got Toby back, who's actually our Australian correspondent. I should say he's out there in the minute, currently living it up. Um, Toby, how's things going? And glad to have you back.
Yeah, good to be back. I'm excited to be back, but it's a bit damper out here than I was expecting. In Adelaide, it's been raining the last few days. Our Big Bash game was rained off yesterday, and it's been not the summer I was hoping for. But either way, the Ashes goes on, the cricket goes on. So yeah, it's been good otherwise.
Dampness in the weather and dampness in the cricket after it started so brightly, Toby, in the first test. It started so brightly. I guess, what are your immediate thoughts on the first test after, having watched the glorious 2 days of it? What do you think England did wrong, right? Where do you think they should go from here? What's your immediate summary?
I don't even know. I don't think anyone knows what happened. It was the craziest 800 balls of cricket or something crazily low like that. It was terrible. In so many ways. It was amazing in so many other ways. I mean, yeah, the disappointment I think is the thing that hits first, really. The fact that England were in such a strong position and I let it slip. There's no other way to put it. When you see them, they were 150 lead, one down, two down, and they had 150 lead and they were four down, five down. It just kind of went from such a strong position to nothing, and then all out and lost 9 wickets for pretty much nothing, 60 odd or whatever it was. And yeah, that just kind of not came out of nowhere because it didn't ever feel like England were dominant or on top, at least for me anyway. Even when they were in a strong position, there's always that knowledge that things can just turn on a dime and go downhill, and that's exactly what happened. So yeah, I think it's disappointment as much as anything else, but I think deep down a little bit of expectance. I think I knew or have had a feeling. I think a lot of people did that England were always going to have a tricky start to the Ashes in Perth and now Brisbane.
Were you not feeling confident at 90 for one was it lunch on day two? Ollie Pope going relatively
I
well. I
was.
mean, that was sort of the moment where I thought it was similar to the India test last summer where you just needed one player to step up and get that 100 because the pitch was sort of flattening out a little bit. And it was just a shame that three of the batsmen gave it away almost. And do you think that's due to skill, lack of preparation? I mean, there's been lots of comments about Ben Stokes about arrogance and preparation. Why do you think that happened? Was it just unlucky?
I think it's probably, I don't know, inexperience isn't necessarily the right word, but just a lack of maturity, maybe as much as anything else. That's perhaps a little bit harsh on the batters. I mean, particularly Root, who is as mature, as experienced, as great as English batters come. But I do think sometimes things just don't go your way, and the way that England play doesn't help that because when things don't go your way, they can really not go your way. I think even as you're saying, to around 90 for one, it was, I don't know, a little bit of me just thought something can change here. And that is always the way. And then perhaps it was almost just a hangover from the day before where England did just collapse. And, the fact that they were all out for 172 um, in the first couple hours of day one, I think perhaps just maybe hung in my mind. But yeah, I think there's no real excuse for those four pretty shoddy wickets, as you say, just after lunch that basically turned the game. And the one positive I will take from it is that England often do learn from their mistakes. You look back to 2023, that Ashes where they were 2-0 down, having played some pretty great cricket, but also a lot of really, really bad cricket. And perhaps, something like this will just be that moment that just sort of kicks them up the arse and turns them into gear. And maybe that could be the time for them, to win a pink ball test where no one perhaps gives them a hope.
Yeah, I get that. It's just, I think the comments from pundits, shouldn't you be having those experiences in warm-up games or, in sort of week-long preparation camps? Did you need to go tour New Zealand for ODIs? And I guess now is the modern way with cricket where they don't prepare all that much. Should they have just been like, we're going to focus on the Ashes, let's have a solid block of training in Australia, try and get used to it? And I don't know, I just feel like even even one or two games before, you sort of do get those mistakes out of your body. I mean, we've all played cricket, obviously not to a high level, but first game of the season on you're on like a turf wicket when you've been practicing in the winter nets all year. You know, you do make mistakes which you don't normally make, and you only got one chance. So it's very different to the nets. I know these guys have much better practice, but do you, do you think English should have more practice matches, or do you think the preparation was good enough?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, they definitely could have had better preparation. And I think the fact that everyone has been commenting on it kind of does show that, and the way they started. I'm not sure that necessarily loads of matches against, random Cricket Australian 11s and state sides or state second 11s, it would have been because Shield's going on at the moment. That wouldn't probably have helped because you're not playing against that same high quality that is Mitchell Stark. You're never going to be able to replicate that. The fact they played their one warm-up game against the Lions, I think is completely fine. The fact they played it, though, in probably one of the flattest, lowest tracks in Western Australia is that's the questionable part for me. But I think also the way that a lot of pundits are now turning and saying, well, they need to go and play the pink ball test in Canberra, which is equally low and slow and terrible in comparison to the Gabba, I think does show that a lot of pundits are just picking fights, perhaps for picking fights' sake. But I don't think that means they were necessarily wrong in their first criticisms of their perhaps playing out in Western Australia rather than at the Wacker or Optus, or a lot of people talked about India who played a couple-day warm-up game at the Wacker before they played at Optus last summer, winter, depending on how you're referring to it, uh, and they had a load of nets at the Wacker as well and Optus leading up to the game. So that's probably what England should have done. But it's also easier said than done because, as you say, they were playing in New Zealand, and as much as that's not a test match and white ball preparation will never be the same, they think that kind of pressure environment and playing international cricket and high level cricket against high level opposition is almost more important than red ball cricket against lower level opposition. And I do kind of see that because if you bring it back to our low level club cricket, Duran, it's one of those, if we go and play, sixth or seventh 11 cricket, it's not going to prepare you for second team cricket or first team cricket by any stretch. Even if, they're both red ball or both white ball, you'd almost be better off going and playing a little T20 against an opposition down the road who is a first 11 or has a county bowl or whatever it might be, just to try and get you there. But I think there should have been a happy balance that they haven't found. And that's really the issue.
Yeah, I think it's all about matching your preparation to what you're going to be facing in the game. And I think England tried to do that with the constraints they had of, we have to make money for the board, we have to do all these tours. And perhaps they got it wrong. And also, I think it's been like a common theme in the Ben Stokes era is that they sort of disregard what the press think of them. And it's like, maybe you do just plan it so that, the press can't hound it. If you have a bad game, no one can say that you didn't do enough of a warm up, right? It's sort of those little things where it's like, okay, we've done the warm up, we've done it in the right way, and yes, we sort of covered our back. If that comes as a thing, we can say, look, it just didn't go our way, and I think people are more accepting of that. Whereas now it's more like these comments of arrogance comes in, which Stokes has to sort of deflect off. Perhaps that's part of their coping mechanism of dealing with the stress, and it's something they can say like, no one's really focusing on how we played. Or Travis Head, they're focusing on the preparation now, which is, classic Sir Alex Ferguson technique. Right? So yeah, potentially that's what they've done. But I mean, looking ahead, obviously Travis Head had that sensational innings. Do you think that was a one-off? Could you see that coming? What were your thoughts when it was unfolding?
Yeah, I don't think it's a one-off, but also it is one of the great innings, as pretty much everyone has said it. Travis Head is, I wouldn't be surprised if he does it again in the Ashes, just because he is that high quality a player, but also like you sometimes do just have to accept that, that's going to happen to you. And particularly with a player like Travis Head, where he is very hot and cold, when he's on form, he is pretty much unstoppable. And that's something that people have known for a long time. No one was expecting him to go up and open the batting. And I do find it hilarious how the Australians have spent months trying to work out who was going to open the batting alongside Usman Khawaja. Was Labuschagne going to go up and Cameron Green at 3? Was there going to be a new batter, Jake Weatherall? And in the end, the answer was yes, it's both of them. And Khawaja misses out both times. But I think, the fact Travis Head comes in and plays innings like that, England could have bowled better to him, but also I think sometimes you just have to accept that, that there is brilliance that's going to happen against you. And with a player like Travis Head, that's the same. And flip it around and come the Gabba, come some of the tests later on. I'm sure Australia will be on the other end of an innings exactly like that by Harry Brook or by Ben Duckett, Zach Crawley. England have, so many players who play in a similar kind of style to Head and have shown us over the last few years that they can be similarly destructive and similarly aggressive and similarly brilliant in so many ways. So I don't think you can necessarily do anything other than just praise Travis Head for that kind of knock.
Yeah, Travis Head's an infuriating player because you bowl properly to him and he just misses everything or slashes them through slips, and then you sort of bowl short to him and everything disappears. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think sometimes it's easy sitting in the commentary box or watching as a fan saying they should have just targeted off stump and got him out. When in fact, when you're sort of in those environments and you're going to all parts, it's understandable even if you're that good a bowler as Jofra Archer that you sort of lose your line of length a little bit, and you've got to take your hat off to Travis Head. I mean, it was a fantastic knock. But you spoke about some of the England batters. One I'm interested in is Zach Crawley, two globes. Obviously his place is never under threat, but there's starting to be quite murmurs on, is Zach Crawley the man? I mean, obviously they'll back him to the hill. I mean, do you think it was just two bad innings? Do you think he's going to come good? Are you still thinking he's the best person to open for England?
Yeah, again, it's another tricky one. I don't think there's necessarily another option right now. I mean, come the end of the series, if England are really getting battered and, you go to the end, you assume Bethel goes up to open perhaps. They maybe look at someone like Tom Haynes, who's in the Lions at the moment, or even Ben McKinney, um, who are both quality players. But McKinney plays in a pretty similar style to Crawley as well. So, sometimes it's going to happen as an opener. And I think, it's almost better in some ways that he's, been out in the first over both times. Against Mitch Starc is undoubtedly one of the best new ball operators maybe ever, but definitely right now. If this happens again at the Gabba with the pink ball, which, is possibly pretty likely, and again at Adelaide, or even if he makes it to Adelaide, if he's out in the first over again twice in the Gabba, then the questions are really going to start. But I think also all it takes for someone like Crawley is to just, Stark was Loosener or Boland the next over if he can make it there. All it'll take is Crawley to flash one through the offside and he'll be going, and you might, strum a 60 ball 70, a 40 ball 30, whatever it might be. Crawley can just do that kind of out of nowhere. He's a very streaky player. He just goes hard at it. And all it takes is a few come out the middle. I think it was Ryan Campbell, Durham's head coach, was on a BBC podcast basically talking exactly like that. That he was a similar kind of opener, looked to be aggressive, looked to try and push the game on. And he basically said, all you need to do is if you get to 20, happy days. You've not actually done your job, but you've made that start. You've got a few out the middle. And worst comes to worst, okay, you got a quick fire 20. Your team's probably 30 for one. It's better than being 0 for 1, 0 for 3 at times. It could be the case with this England side. I wouldn't be surprised about. So I think that's almost one of those where, it's going to happen with an opener. And I think it's perhaps being drawn on even more so by the fact that, Crawley and this whole sort of Bazball kind of 3-year cycle with him has been very up and down. And it's one of those, if he had been a pretty consistent player, Duckett could have very easily have 2 first ballers or 2 first over dismissals. And I think people will be a little bit more relaxed about it because Duckett has had a bit of form recently. And obviously that's maybe why people are more concerned about Crawley, or it's definitely why people are more concerned about Crawley because he hasn't had any recent form. But people also forget that he has a very, very good record against the elite bowlers of the world, against Stark, Cummins, against Hazelwood, against Bumrah. He averages much, much more than 99% of people ever would even think about averaging in world cricket. I'm not concerned yet, but I think there's, anything, as I said, anything can happen. Like the thing with the Ashes is crazy things happen every game. So he could very easily go and make a pair in the next game and then a ton up in Adelaide, or go and, just make duck after duck after duck after duck and be dropped by Adelaide. So who knows what will happen?
Yeah, for me, there's no one really better at the minute. Crawley, I mean, I'm an India fan, right? You see, if Crawley gets going, you can't really bowl to him because anything wide goes, anything short, he's destructive. On the legs, it's gone as well. So I think, yeah, it's just about him getting a start somehow. I think Michael Vaughan said it on City Cricket is they've backed him for 3 out of 10 innings, right? That's all they want. They want 3 innings out of 10, not necessarily hundreds. They want 50, 60, and 100 maybe, and they basically said they're happy with that. So I think it's 3 and 8 he needs now, which is perfectly doable. It's just whether he gets a chance and the Pimple test and later on. I think England were unlucky because you had Stark and you had Cummins and Hazelwood out, and then Stark really showed up to the party. And normally Stark's the one you think you can get at a little bit. Um, so yeah, I think they were very unlucky that Stark sort of came to the fore last game. But overall, I think it was a very exciting test match as a neutral. It's just a shame, I think, that the pitch. Ideally, you want to see 3 or 4 days of cricket in Ashes cricket. I mean, what did you think of the pitch? Do you agree with Khawaja? It was a rubbish pitch, or will Cricket Australia sanction you as well, or have a word with you if you say anything bad?
Yeah, have to be careful here, don't I? Have to be careful. I don't know. I've spoken to a few people, and I don't think anyone over here thinks it was particularly terrible as pitches go. Batting in Western Australia in particular has been a lot trickier of recent times. When you look at the Shield in particular, but other grounds, other matches, other series as well. So I think it wasn't necessarily a good pitch for batting, but I think both weaknesses in each batting lineup kind of exaggerate the issues in the pitch and also the strengths in both bowling lineup. When you look at the names on paper, despite, as you say, there being no Cummins and Hazelwood, that's still an incredibly strong Australian bowling lineup with a lot of Sheffield Shield wickets, a lot of experience behind them. Even if they've not actually got huge amounts of test experience, they've got experience in Australia, in Western Australia in particular. I think that in itself, you've got to think about people have underestimated England's bowling strength. Perhaps because it is a little bit on the rawer side. No one really has more than 20 match caps other than Mark Wood in this England side. So I think perhaps that underestimation as well. But then, as I think you've already mentioned, around the fact that by the end of day 2, it was not actually a flat track, but Travis Head had a field day. And all it would have taken is perhaps, if you look at kind of perhaps India versus Australia as an example on that, there were a lot of wickets on that day 1 of that game as well. I think perhaps 17 or a few less, but there were still a lot of wickets. But it, again, similarly, did last that little bit longer because both sides' batting lineups, perhaps frail, but they're a lot more sensible perhaps than England's, where I think everything becomes more exaggerated, more up and down. And if you have a bad day as an England batting lineup, it can go catastrophically wrong, as shown. I think that is more of the issue. It wasn't a good wicket for batters, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a good test match wicket, I think.
Yeah, I think it was, if England maybe batted 20, 30 more overs on that first day and it sort of goes on a little bit, I think you'd have seen a longer test match. I think it's just, as you said, how basketball plays out. I guess one thing that struck me in the test match was, and I know we spoke about it last time, is sort of, is Jamie Smith going to start going above Ben Stokes? Because obviously he got a pretty poor decision. I thought it was a pretty poor decision.
I agree.
I don't think there's enough evidence to really overturn that. I mean, maybe let's talk about that a bit. Why do you think the umpires made that decision? Do you think it was sort of pressure or just misinterpretation of the rules? Do you think it was fair?
I think it's one of those that the fact the umpire's taken 5 minutes almost to make that decision, that's an issue. And as a third umpire, I get that it's not going to be black and white, but it should be one of those where if you've got any sort of uncertainty that something is, majority likeliness is out, then you can't overturn an umpire's decision. I think that's the biggest issue that I had, is that the umpire took so long and was evidently pretty unsure about what was happening that they therefore had to not overturn an on-field umpire's decision, as that is stated in the law book, or at least in playing conditions. And that's the thing that kind of annoyed me as much as anything else. I think James Smith didn't help himself because he saw the snick and started to walk off. I think if he had generally just stood there and looked his sort of usual sort of nothingness face that he hasn't really got, this face that doesn't really show much emotion, I think he would have been fine. But the fact he'd sort of started to sort of wander off, then stopped and went again and then stopped again, I think probably didn't help his cause. But I was baffled that the umpire gave that. The fact that they spent so long and therefore evidently were not sure about that decision, I think means you can never change what the on-field umpire has said.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those where you kind of got to accept. I think they went through the laws and probably applied it as they saw it, but for me, there wasn't enough evidence to give that out. But I can see why they come to the decision. I don't think it changed the the result of the test match, thankfully, which always brushes that. I think if it was a close test, then that would have been a huge talking point. But because obviously it was so one-sided in the end, everyone's sort of forgotten about it now, which is somewhat nice because you don't want these test matches being decided on umpires' decisions. But going back to James Smith, the batter, he's the one batter that looked really good in both innings. First innings batted really well. Seems to me that, I spoke to a few people that he sort of runs out of partners. So is it time? Everyone always talks about James Smith should bat 4 for England. I mean, is it time he goes ahead of Stokes? Do you think that's viable? Do you think Stokes would do that as a captain?
I'm not sure. I can't see it happening in this series just because I think Stokes likes that number 6 position. That was pretty much the first announcement he made when he was named captain. He said Joe Root's batting at number 4 and he's batting at number 6, like full stop. And he's pretty much done exactly that. Root's only ever batted at 4, barring some injuries or, night watchman or whatever. And the same for Stokes. He's only ever batted at 6 when he has been fit. And I mean, I think he's batted at 3 once or twice if there's been injuries around and a few other question marks over players. But generally, he's stuck by his guns and that's exactly what he's done. So I can't imagine he'll look to change things, particularly mid-series. We know how stubborn Stokes and McCullum are. Again, perhaps this is a harsh use of language, but they stick with their guns at least, and they're gonna die on the hill, to use a hell of a lot of different colloquialisms and phrases there. But I think I can't see them making the change. Whether they should make the change is maybe a different thing. I think long term James Smith is undoubtedly a top 5 batter for England. Whether he keeps or not, is another question. He's a good gloveman. He's not a great gloveman, but that's kind of just the way that keeping is going, particularly in England anyway at the moment. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if James Smith bats at 3 or 4 in the next 3 or 4 years for England, and doesn't keep, for example, because he is just that talented. He's that good. You can tell how much and how highly rated he is by this England coaching setup, by the fact he's been, given the opportunity to open in white ball cricket, both T20 and ODIs. They just dropped him in, not actually out of nowhere, but he'd basically batted at sort of 4, 5, 6 for Surrey in the T20 stuff and had been extremely dangerous and devastating down the order. And he's done he batted a little bit higher up in some of the 100 games, but England basically just said, look, this is kind of made for you. We want to give you as long as possible. Just go in there, play your game and score a load of runs. And it's not quite come off for him, but it will. It inevitably will. He is that good a player. And long term, I do think he will slide up, but I can't see it happen at the moment. I don't know what you think, Taran, but I think England and Stokes and McCullum are just pretty set in their ways and think this is what we're preparing for. We like him down at 7 because he can be so destructive. They're just going to keep it as is, whether or not it's the right decision.
Yeah, for me, I think this is just one of those things where I think it's more as a leadership point for Stokes. He's got all these monkeys on his back about the arrogance of the team not changing. This could be a moment for Ben Stokes to say, look, Jamie Smith, we back him. At the minute, I think him at number 6, me at 7 works better. I'm willing to change. And it's sort of, there's that underlying current that the English fans, if you get beat in the second test on the pink ball and playing the same way, flashing at everything, it's kind of like, we're dying on this hill, but is it working? Whereas if I think Stokes concedes a little bit, it's more about the man management and playing the game a bit more, then I think it'll work better. And I think James Smith up the order is a better option than Ben Stokes. Do I think Stokes is going to think like that? I think I'm with you. I don't think he will. I think he sort of said this series, him and Baz, they're going to go out with, do what they want to do, the way they've said they're going to bat and just go out and give it their best shot. And if it comes off, it comes off. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But yeah, I think James Smith.
Can you see them making any change? Obviously, there are going to be little tweaks here and there, but do you think they've just sort of gone through this 4-year cycle and said, this is what we think is the best thing, we're going to just do it? If everything goes up in flames, so be it. We're just sort of backing ourselves here now.
Yeah, I think that's what they've done throughout their whole tenure. They've said, we're backing Zach Crawley at 1, we're backing Duckett. So once they've gone with that, then obviously they have to continue. And I think Stokes has just said that's his whole mantra. It's been, we're going to back these guys, we're going to play this way, and we believe it's the best way. Not necessarily that we'll win, but it's the best way we can win with the talent we have available. And I think they've just got full conviction in that. Then again, I don't think you can make small tweaks to that without going away from sort of that ideology. I think that's probably what rankles a little bit. But we'll see. I mean, it's interesting what they'll do. Obviously, no spinner probably for the pink ball test match, and no Mark Wood. Just been ruled out with a knee injuries. It'll be interesting to see who they actually go with in that second test, whether they go with Tongue or if they go sort of the safer option with Matt Potts, who can I would say he can hold a bat. I'm not sure he can bat a bit, but he can hold a bat, unlike Josh Tongue.
Yeah, I assume they're going with Tongue. I think they like Tongue a lot. I was a little bit surprised they went for Cast. I mean, I would have gone for Cast. I think Tongue offers a different, is a very different type of bowler, and perhaps more along the lines of Mark Wood, where he looks to use his pace a lot. He's not as quick as Wood, but his pace is good, and he's a very skillful bowler. Tongue as well. Cast is a bit more, kind of has a bit more sort of longevity about him and a bit more stamina. He's just going to go and go and go and go and almost wear batters down. But I'm glad they went for Cast because I think he did show his skills. But yeah, I think Tongue is probably the nailed on favourite to come in, just because I think he was part of that sort of 5-man or 6-man, I guess, including Stokes, seam kind of barrage that they've got. And Potts was always that kind of last man in to the squad. It felt like didn't play any part really over the summer. He played a little bit 2 summers ago and has been in and around the side for a long time, but he's never really been the main guy under Bazball. Whereas I think they've always looked at Tongue and thought he's the kind of guy that we want, and now they've got him.
Yeah, the England. I think with the bowlers, what England really like is players with special attributes. Obviously, Wood's pace, Joffre's world class. Stokes got the angle. Potts is really sort of just work with Tongue. He's quick, 87, can get up to 90, but he does have that sort of action where it's like Bumrah-esque, where it sort of comes out and draws a batsman. I think the accuracy um, is something that will be interesting, especially if the game's tight in a pink ball test match. You don't. Australia have got sort of Doggett. I don't know if Cummins is playing, but obviously Hazelwood's out, and Stark, who outline obviously Boland, who are very accurate, so they won't give too much away. It's in those tight games where Stokes can trust Tongue and be like, look, we need a good spell here. We need you to get Steve Smith out. We need you to get Labuschagne out. The game's really on edge, and whether he can do that. And I think they've just got to trust the fact that he can, because they haven't got really anyone else. I don't think Potts is that bowler who's going to break open a game for you. He's going to be someone who'll nip out a wicket, keep it tight, but he's not going to break open a game.
I think especially when you have, or when you are going with 5 seamers, including Stokes, Potts, that I think he is a very skillful bowler, but that's not necessarily his strength. I think they look at him as that kind of Mr. Consistent, and he will just bowl you the longest spells ever. When you've got 5 seamers, you don't need that, first of all. And also the way that the games are seemingly going, 2 days, maybe 3 days if we're lucky, you definitely don't need someone who can bowl you a 10 over, 12 over spell, which Potts can definitely do. But I don't think that's necessarily a skill that is required at the moment anyway. Maybe when you go to some of the flatter tracks later down the line, if England still want to persist with 5 seamers, you could then look at using him in that kind of respect. But I can't see it being that valuable a skill at the Gabba.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think yeah, it's just interesting how this test match will play out, because obviously both you think it's going to be a short test match. I think all test matches generally are short. Obviously Australia have got big concerns over the batting lineup. If the English batting lineup sort of gets on song and they get a good period where they can bat in the right conditions, you can see England winning this match. I don't think England are out of it. But I think the bigger question is, before we get into sort of the details of the test itself, is, do you think the Ashes series needs a pink ball test match? I can see it for smaller series, but I don't know what it adds to the spectacle. Because I personally, I'm not a huge fan of pink ball test matches. I think it just leaves too much up for lottery. And I get it for when there's smaller viewing audiences and you want to get people in after work, but does an Ashes test match need that? There's a reason why we don't have test matches under lights in England, right?
Yeah, we barely have any matches under lights in England. I think maybe it was 2017 that did we have a game against West Indies back then that was pink ball maybe. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is evident that the Australian crowds generally aren't as strong as English crowds, but you are bang on with the Ashes. They have, or at least they were very, very much on track for probably one of the biggest attendances ever in a test series. Obviously losing 3 days attendance in the first test isn't helpful, and likely a few more along the way as well. But they sold out, I think it was well over 100,000 people for days 1 and 2 in Perth, and you'd assume could be pretty similar for the rest of the tests at least. So yeah, I'm not, I hadn't actually thought about it, to be fair, about whether it's needed. It's obviously something Cricket Australia like, because they do it pretty much every year. They have a pink ball test. Previously, it's been at the Adelaide Oval. I think it was the Gabba for that famous West Indies victory 2 years ago now. But otherwise, it has almost always been at Adelaide. Yeah, you are dead on as well with the fact that it leaves a lot up to lottery, because so much of of a pink ball test matters as to when you're batting. I was covering one of the Shield games, and because they have a pink ball round, at least one pink ball round every season. The first day was rained out at Adelaide Oval. This was between South Australia, Western Australia. Saw reasonable amount of wickets. The Western Australia were skittled for about 188, and then South Australia lost a wicket. Day three, similarly, South Australia then skittled, and Western Australia lost a couple. But then day four, it was the sun. Like wasn't the sunniest day, but it definitely flattened out the track a lot. The pink ball was pretty much old the whole way through. Just didn't offer much at all to the bowlers. There was chances, but as you say, it depends so heavily on the conditions. The pink ball in particular, because it goes softer quicker. It loses its sort of ability to nip and swing quicker, but it becomes even more dangerous when it's hard and new right at the start, and also especially when it's under lights. If you have a new pink ball in that sort of final 2 hours, a final hour and a half, it can be devastating. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see England maybe try a few of their sort of tricks and declare kind of slightly crazily times just to try and put Australia in under lights and get a couple wickets and play their kind of crazy way. And I wouldn't necessarily be against it, because I think Stokes is almost at his best when he's not trying to be too smart, but when he is thinking about things in a very like aggressive way. I think maybe declaring on day one would be perhaps a little bit over the top, unless England somehow rack up 400 in the first day. But
Yeah,
I'm sure at some point England could put in a rogue declaration with 2 wickets to go, and they've got perhaps a slightly smaller lead than people would hope for, but it's what Stokes does. He likes to be kind of controversial, I guess, in a lot of ways. Not necessarily just for being controversial for sake, but because he thinks it confuses opposition. It puts people in awkward positions, and I think he backs himself in an awkward position over pretty much anyone else.
yeah. I think for me, if I was looking, if I was Ben Stokes and thinking through Ben Stokes' mind, I'd say the blueprint would be bat day one and get 365 overs, go fives, and then put Australia in and try and break loose with Archer, and try and get them 3 or 4 down, and then come back the next day and really grab
See if
hold
you
of
can
the
get
test.
Travis Head out in the first couple overs.
Yeah, it's just interesting how the tactics will play out. But I mean, what do you think England will try and do, and what do you think England can do if maybe it doesn't go right for them? What's the blueprint for them either way?
Yeah, again, I was. So I mean, this is going back to the first test, but I was surprised England won the toss and batted first. It's classic Ben Stokes to have a chase, not to bowl first, but to have a chase, in his own words. And I think the fact that he batted first, a little bit of me was very worried that he was almost sort of psyching himself out and thinking back to, Nasser Hussain in 2002-3, where he was, went into bowl first at the Gabba and Australia pile on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. A little bit of me was sort of deep down was like, has Ben Stokes just bottled this? Has he crapped the bed? Is he really struggling here? But when you saw him after the game, when you saw him throughout the game, I don't think it was that. I think that was maybe people reading into it, and actually both him and Steve Smith and a lot of people thought actually it's a batting pitch, and so understandable in the end. But I reckon he could maybe look to, as you say, have a bat first, try and pile on the runs, and actually you can probably free up Zach Crawley if you say to him, look, we want to go at fives. We know you can do that comfortably, and just go. He goes out there, has a bit of a hit, he pulls a few off and gets going and rattles off, as you said, a sort of 60, 70, 80, which is more than enough in Ben Stokes' eyes. But again, he maybe wouldn't be against looking to have a chase because he knows he can do that. And I think that's almost been perhaps a lucky side effect to this England side, is because early on they were so strong at chasing. It's almost just kind of continue with them, and they are known as this sort of strong chasing side. And in the changing rooms, they will know themselves as an incredibly strong chasing side. And that, I think, perhaps almost sort of psychs them out in a really good way, because if they have to chase, if they're put in, they can almost say to themselves, look, we've done this a million times before. It doesn't matter. This is perfect. Whereas a lot of teams in the past, when Australia bat first, if they pile on three, four, 500s, a lot of teams are thinking you're basically out of this. You have to be batting for the draw, playing for draw at this time. England are never playing for the draw, knowing they can always win and proving to themselves and to everyone else that they have been able to win for any positions. I think Stokes probably won't go into the game with an idea of what he wants to do. I think you hope anyway, but I think he will be smart about it. Look at the pitch, look down, see what you want to do, and play it from there. But I think he's also happy to back himself and his team in whatever position they end up in.
Yeah, and I also think the pink ball will suit the batters. Obviously, you'll get some movement under lights. Stark is pretty deadly with that new ball. He bowled an unbelievable spell against India. I remember Shubman Gill, one of the best deliveries I've ever seen, like a banana, took out his middle stump. But I think if it's sunny during the day, that pink ball when it's new, it sort of comes onto the bat. It's quite hard. It's something that you can imagine Zach Crawley liking, Ben Duckett liking, especially Harry Brook. I think if he gets in, he's had 2 knocks now to acclimatise. He'll have had a week of training as well. I think it's definitely something where I can see England doing well with the bat. And as we've always said, now they know they've got enough firepower with the resources. I think it could be something where we look back and say, if England win, obviously everyone looks back with rose tinted glasses, but they'll say, yeah, during that first innings of that first test, we sort of knew that we had the firepower to really destroy that Australian batting lineup. And obviously it didn't go well in the second innings, but they could sort of use that as the blueprint. So for me, that's what I'm excited about. I don't think this series is over at all. That's why I think there's still that huge interest. But I think this is the game that England have to win. I think they have to be 1-1 going into that third test. Otherwise, it's done. Really, you're not coming back from 2-0 down. But do you think the batting will suit, or the pink ball will suit the England batters, or do you think it will be sort of same service resumed in Australia after the Travis Head mauling?
No, I think England will come back to it with a bit between the teeth, and I want to prove their haters wrong, because there have been a lot that have come out of since the last test to really just pile on this England side. And I think they will struggle inevitably at some point during this game. Stark will probably get on top, but I also think, as you say, the bowlers are more than capable of it as well. Archer, I think, could be crazily deadly at some point. Gus Atkinson, I love as well. I think he's a really, really good player. I think that as a new ball partnership is very exciting. As you say, if they can get the new ball under lights at some point, I reckon they can make a lot of headway against this Australian side. So I think that'll be what they're looking at. Whether or not it suits England more, I think we don't really know, because they've never played with it. This will be the first pink ball game that pretty much all of the team will have played. I'm trying to think who would have played in that last one in 2015. Stokes probably would have been, Root would have been there. Woods, maybe, but he's obviously not playing. We've said he's already out injured. So um, genuinely could just be those two who have actually played in a pink ball game before, or at least a high level test match with a pink ball before. So, actually, no, who would have been there in 2021, 22? I'm just trying to think, down under. Maybe a couple others might have been thereabouts, Pope and Crawley maybe.
Yeah,
But again, they wouldn't have. I can't imagine they'd have faced many deliveries.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
with
I
the way
mean,
that series went.
Pope's been the surprise one for me. I mean, he's looked really good. Obviously, he had a great start. I thought, in that sort of, in those low scoring matches, he's got a couple of 30s, right? And he looked good. I think hopefully it's not like a classic Ollie Pope series where it goes down and down and down. But in terms of just
I
watching
was
him
going to say,
bat, I think he looks
you can
on
definitely put,
form.
yeah, you look good, but as you said there, it's inevitable that 46 is now going to be his high score of the series. Unfortunately, he had to make a ton, otherwise it's all going downhill. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's a tricky one with Pope again, isn't it? I think he, as you say, looked in as good a form as he kind of ever has for England, but he is a very scratchy player, very streaky player. Again, I could see him kind of putting on a few runs when the kind of ball gets a little bit older in Brisbane. Pitch is a little bit flatter. He can pile on the kind of runs in those situations, but he also does get himself out in a lot of those ones as well. And if he's really not kind of knuckled down by the time a new ball comes, or by the time the lights are getting turned on, I think he can get himself in a little bit of trouble. But no, I've been pleasantly surprised by him. His 100 in the warm up, or 190 in the warm ups. That was impressive again as well. So no, it's been good to see him making at least a couple runs, and hopefully he makes a few more.
Yeah, no, I think this is a series where it's Pope's ashes. Like Bear was in
Yeah.
2013. It's going to be Pope's ashes. He's sort of that. For me, he's always been the Joe Root, Ian Bell hybrid, but never really lived up to the billing. Hopefully, we get to see it this Ashes again. He does have that. I think all the England batsmen seem to have that frailty of chasing the wide one and the rising ball. In England, on the flat pitches, it's sort of like you can get away with it and just drive through the line. Maybe in Australia you can't. Yeah, I think going back though, one thing I didn't quite comment upon was the chasing aspect of this England side. I think if they do get the opportunity, I think that is probably the best blueprint for them, because they love it when it's flat, and because England play the game so quickly, you're chasing on day 4, day 3, end of day 3, day 4, which is the best days for batting, and that's where you can pile up serious runs. So potentially, if it was reversed and England did bowl first in that first Test match, they would have had the opposite of Harry Brook pulling a Travis Head, or Zach Crawley pulling a Travis Head, and we could be sitting here saying that, England have done the impossible, we're going to win the Ashes. So it's it's one of those where it's interesting. You never know with hindsight, but I'm I'm quietly hopeful that England have got a few good performances in them. But it is now or never now for the Ashes. It feels that way. And do you think that pressure's?
Absolutely. Fingers
Do you
crossed.
think Ben Stokes is feeling that pressure? Do you think the England team are feeling that pressure?
I'm sure they are. I feel like Ben Stokes maybe not. I think he is just such a cool, calm, collected guy. Same as Brendan McCullum. I think they're kind of just going to be happy as is. I'd be surprised if the rest of the England 11 are not feeling the pressure. I think Root will be feeling pressure of not scoring 100 still in Australia, and that will be a big focus throughout the series. I think a lot of the rest of the sort of top five in Brook and the openers and Pope will be feeling the pressure again that they all got themselves out at various times throughout that game, and we disappointed that none of them managed to have a big impact that they've been hoping to. I think the bowlers will be disappointed and feel the pressure on that second innings and what Travis Head did to them. But I also think that this England's coaching setup have proven that they can deal with the pressure and help the players deal with the pressure better than pretty much anyone else or any other coaching setup over the last 10, 15 years as well. So I think this England side, which is why it's so hard to predict what's ever going to happen with them, but this England side are so up and down that they can go from being absolutely blown away to blowing other teams away, and vice versa. You looked at that Pakistan series, 2 winters ago now, and they won that first game in brilliant form with Root and Brook piling on between them. But then they went on and got absolutely battered in the second and third game. Obviously, conditions changed. Conditions will always change throughout a series. But I think that kind of almost summed up the extreme levels of how up and down the side can be. And it's always going to happen. Beaten New Zealand sides, 2-1. They've gone to India and won a game down there in incredible fashion, despite losing the whole series 4-1. This is Australian side in England in 2023. They were 2-0 down, ended up drawing 2-2 and perhaps being the better side in that one drawn game as well. So I think, anything can happen with the side, and that is why they have been such a watchable side. And it's why so many English fans have come down to Australia this summer. But it's also why it hurts even more when they do lose that first test in such catastrophic fashion.
Yeah, and I think it's like obviously England are under pressure, but England haven't really had the chance that they've maybe end of day two, or end of day one, sorry. But Australia have got lots of concerns. Obviously, Kawaja, he's not opened this series. There's pressure on him, dodgy back, playing a bit of golf. Sort of, there's murmurings there. You can sort of see that playing out. Doggett hasn't been tested. They don't have, they've got Stark who can bat lower order now, but before you had Cummins as well, who was handy with the bat. Now you've got sort of 3 number 11s there, and they haven't sort of had to come to the fore yet. So it's, especially with Josh Tongue coming in. So I can see a situation where England just need that one performance to turn the tide. So for all the doom and gloom, for me, it's not over. I think there's definitely a lot of scope for England to get back into this. I guess, given time, Toby, what's your predictions for the second test? What do you think is going to happen? Who do you think is going to win? Objectively, and then probably maybe from your heart
Yeah.
as well.
I don't know. I think heart is saying England are going to fight back into this and get going and really make this series an absolute classic. Head is saying that Head could do what he did again. I think Australia, with their experience with the pink ball, with having someone like Mitch Stark, and the fact England have basically never played with a pink ball, does just make it that little bit trickier to see England going on and winning. I think I said before the series, can't remember if it was on here or just sort of generally, but I just couldn't see England being 2-0 up heading into Adelaide, because they'd basically never won in Perth in modern cricket times, and they'd never won a pink ball test or at Brisbane in modern times as well. So I think they were starting with the two most challenging venues. Adelaide's not much easier either as well. So I think it's again the trickiest venues around. I think Head's saying Australia take it, but a little bit of me really hopes and believes that England can do it and turn the series around and go on to win massively. But I think realistically, it's probably still Australia heavy favourites.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the key battle is if you can get a Mitchell Stark, if you can keep him quiet. I don't think. Obviously, Boland had a good pink ball test last summer, but I don't think Boland and Doggett are going to give you too much worries or give England too much worries at the minute. I think it's Stark with the pink ball who's the key person. Obviously, he's in form as well, so I think if you keep him quiet, I'm backing the England batsman to get some runs on the board, and then it just comes down to, I think you probably need a spell from Archer and Stokes to really drive it home. I'm back in England. I'm still going with my. I can't remember if I predicted 3-1 or 2-1 before the series, but I'm still going with England to win the series. I still have that faint hope. I just think the batting lineup's too good, and that bowling lineup is too good as well. And hopefully, Mark Wood's injury isn't serious. I don't know whether you've heard anything more, if it'll keep him out for the series or if it's just a one-off precaution.
Yeah, I think he's almost certainly ruled out of the pink ball, but I think they are expecting him to be back for Adelaide and beyond. And again, there is another 10-day break, possibly more, but about 10 days between the second and third again. So there's no real need to rush him back. He's still got 2 weeks, best part of 3 weeks even till that start of the Adelaide Test from now. So he's still got a long time to really think about it before they even have to try and push him back in. And England do have a lot of cover for him, so they don't need to rush him as well.
Yeah, that's the beauty of grooming that fast bowling. Like, yeah, I don't know how you can't call it a quartet, but numerous
Yeah.
fast bowlers they've got that you can bring in Tongue, and no one's Wood, but Tongue has got attributes which some are better than Wood, some are not as good as Wood. But I think as a like for like, it's not the worst replacement. It's not like you're bringing in sort of an 80-mile-an-hour seamer. Whose name actually forgets me now. What was it? Who was he that played? I've forgotten.
Potts, do you mean, or Sam Cook, or
Sam Cook. Sam Cook. That was it. That's how far the England's Test seam attack has gone. I've forgotten who Sam Cook is. But imagine if your only option was Sam Cook and you're bringing him in, it would be a bit like everyone would be questioning the thought process there.
for the pink ball though? Could be the one. Get James Anderson back in there.
Yeah, I was actually having this debate. I was like, should they have kept Jimmy? Just if you've got a 5-man attack, you just get Jimmy.
Yeah.
New ball both innings. That's all he does. His record was good against the new ball at the end of his career. It was only with the old ball that's why they sort of got rid of him. I mean, he still did well for Lancashire. All the players sort of speak about how good he is still. I still think he could have done a job in the pink ball test. And that would have been very sort of Ben Stokes saying, Jimmy Anderson's here to play the pink ball test. That's it. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I did think they could look to him or Wokes for that pink ball, but I think maybe that's just our rose-tinted glasses, kind of looking back at him as a brilliant player, and he had a few good moments with the pink ball in recent Ashes series.
Yeah, he bowled that unbelievable spell. I remember that in swing he got. Was it Steve Smith leaving it? I can't remember. Yeah,
Smith, that was a beauty. 17-18, I think that was that.
Yeah, it was a
or
while
maybe even the
ago.
last series.
Anderson, he hasn't really dropped off in that regard, so we'll see. Anyway, Toby, any final thoughts on the second game before I let you leave? And hopefully we're going to be doing this a bit more regularly throughout the next couple of weeks while the Ashes is on. So I'll see you next week. But yeah, Toby, anything you want to sign off with?
Yeah, bold prediction. We'll just go with Zach Crawley to make one other single figure. I think he'll score at least one run. There we go. Bold prediction for Zach Crawley. No, I think he'll score a single figure, and I reckon he'll make a 50.
Yeah.
And that'll get everyone off his back a little bit. That's
Imagine
my prediction.
Zach Crawley with a match-winning 100 and then the old mic drop Joe Root celebration. That would be my ideal scenario. But
and then gets a pair again in Adelaide. Probably.
Yeah, but he's done his job. He's done his job. Ollie Pope scored runs. Harry Brooks scores. They rack up 600 and everything's forgotten. But one can dream. One can dream. Anyway, Toby, really appreciate your time, and I'll catch you soon. And hopefully the next test goes much better.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Cheers for having me on, mate.